In the summer of 2019, I had seen several people on Twitter repost this article called The Pregnancy Pickle. I was pregnant at the time, and so it caught my attention. And it's an article that was written by a researcher at Arizona State University. And her colleagues were looking at the discrepancy between men and women in terms of the prevalence of autoimmune diseases. Most people who have autoimmune diseases are women, and there's a certain subset of them that are particularly more likely to occur among women. I was told when I was pregnant that there's something about pregnancy that helps to alleviate the symptoms. And so I found that really interesting, and I would ask why, and my doctors would say, we don't really know. And this article confirmed that we don't really know why many of them occur more in women than in men, and also why pregnancy seems to mitigate some of the symptoms.
The basic hypothesis is that women who may delay childbirth or not have children are going to be at greater risk for autoimmune disorders, and this might account for gender differences in risk for autoimmune disorders. And we're using a longitudinal national representative study. They followed over 12,000 people as they've aged. They know everything about when the women were pregnant, like when they had their children, if they had children, and they also asked whether they had been diagnosed with a wide variety of health conditions, including some autoimmune disorders. As rich as the data set is, they weren't as interested in health outcomes as we are. So they're very selective in what they asked, and their sort of process of identifying who was diagnosed and who wasn't is a bit imprecise. And so what we'd like to do next is to start data collection with individuals who previously attended UD and their siblings.
There seems to be sort of this complacency with not knowing why it happens. And so I found this to be a really promising potential avenue to explore because it's providing a really interesting and different way of looking at why many autoimmune diseases are higher among women than men.
Sort of the long-term implications is that the more we know about what causes these kinds of disorders, the greater the likelihood that we can begin to sort of maybe reach some conclusions about how we might be able to address or sort of solve some of those issues.
In different parts of the world, depending on the industrialization of the nation, there's different rates of autoimmune diseases. So there's the potential to do a lot of really interesting follow-up research depending on what we find here.
We're trying to understand a mechanism, we're trying to understand an underlying cause, which is a very difficult thing to do, but it provides a foundation for others to use the work to, hopefully develop interventions that haven't been evaluated or designed before. And this is especially important for autoimmune disorders because there are not cures for these disorders. And so the more that we know, the more likely it is that others will maybe use the information to help develop better interventions or maybe even cure someday.